It's now national co-chair for President Biden's re-election campaign, former Louisiana Governor Mitch Landrieu. Governor, great to have you with us this morning. So what is your take, your political instinct coming out of Iowa? A 30-point win for Donald Trump. He's got a couple of candidates now who are going to stay in the race, and Governor DeSantis and Ambassador Haley. They'll be around at least for New Hampshire, maybe down into South Carolina for both of them, actually. We also saw, just in Iowa anyway, an electorate among Republicans that has bought into the lie that Joe Biden did not win the presidential election. An electorate, a majority, saying last night they still would vote for Donald Trump even if he's convicted in one of his trials. What's your takeaway from all that?
No, I guess my takeaway is that's amazing. You have seen in the last 5 or 6 months every candidate for the presidency on the Republican side racing over to the extreme MAGA side of the party that Donald Trump clearly owns. The Republican Party that used to be a really great part of the American political system is dead. Donald Trump owns the MAGA right. And last night, 50,000 Iowans, 2/3 of whom believe that the election was stolen, election deniers, and actually say it doesn't matter to them if the president of the United States is actually a convicted criminal, should tell you all you need to know about the current Republican Party. That was evidence in Iowa last night that, by the way, does not represent most Republicans in the country, moderates and our independents. The president's quote earlier today was exactly right. Everybody's always known this was going to be a fight between Joe Biden and Donald Trump, but really a fight between two big ideas. Joe Biden wakes up every day. He ran for the presidency to save a democracy which is under threat. Donald Trump and MAGA Trumpism is an existential threat. It's the greatest threat to democracy that we've seen in our life, and all of us are going to have to get in this fight because we know how hard it's going to be. And also, the president wakes up every day fighting for average, everyday Americans. Think about this. Donald Trump was born with $1 million spoon in his mouth and probably never sat at the kitchen table. Joe Biden grew up at the kitchen table in Scranton after his dad got fired and has been working every day to make sure that we put great jobs on the table for folks and put money in people's pockets so they can build generational wealth and have dignity in their life.
Yeah, there was a $400 million spoon his daddy gave him. He spit it out when, his companies went bankrupt. I mean, come on, man. You and I grew up along the Gulf Coast. This guy is not a man of the people. He's not even close. But I want to just let's dig in. I know you've heard this, like I've heard this. You talk to pollsters, you talk to people in focus groups, you talk to people inside the White House, and they will tell you that so many people in polls that they've talked to over the past 6 months go, no. It's not going to be Trump. It's not going to be Trump. I'm going to vote for whoever it is, but Trump's not going to win this. So we do this 4 hours a day. You live it. But there are a lot of people out there who aren't tuned in that haven't really focused on the threat before them. I'll tell you what, Iowa helps. Iowa brings that reality a little closer home to people that are disengaged.
Well, I think when somebody slaps the crap out of you, you start paying attention. And that's what Iowa did to the country last night. Now, the president, as you noted earlier, Joe, went to Valley Forge. He went to South Carolina. He's given 4 speeches on the threat to democracy that Donald Trump poses. Americans, when they start paying attention, folks that have gone to work every day, taking their kids to school, trying to get back and forth to church and the ballpark, are going to start waking up and thinking, what the hell just happened? Now, Joe Biden has shown up every day with his shoulder to the wheel. I disagree with Joe Klein strenuously that Joe Biden looks weak. You can't pass 4 of the biggest pieces of legislation in the history of the country and be weak. You remember Donald Trump said that when he came to the White House, he was going to be a builder. He hasn't built a damn thing. Joe Biden's got 40,000 projects going on in this country right now, rebuilding the roads and the bridges and the airports and the ports, making sure that people have high-speed internet, clean air, safe water, and a clean energy economy. Donald Trump hasn't built anything. He is a destroyer. He's an insurrectionist. Joe Biden's working hard today. Donald Trump's in trial yet again, one of the 6 that he's going to be in. And I just believe the American people, when they focus in on this and have to choose between Joe Biden, who gets up every day fighting for the American people, and Donald Trump, who fights for himself, I think they're going to do, Joe, the same thing you noticed in 2017, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, and 23. And they're going to vote for Joe Biden, because you know who the only guy is in America that's beaten Donald Trump in an election? Joseph Robinette Biden. He did it once, and he's going to do it again.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought up the people that get up, go to work, take their kids to school, the people that go to church, the people that go, again, day in and day out that may not be focused on this. You look also at, only 14% of Iowans, Mika, went out and voted last night. That's really low. I'd be concerned if I were a Republican. And I want you to see something. If we can put up Joe Biden's tweet again, this is so important. And it shows that Joe Biden gets, I'll be really honest with you, what a lot of Democrats in the past have not gotten. Joe Biden gets what Mitch gets, what Mayor Mitch gets, and it's this, that we're running, he says, against extreme MAGA Republicans. Mika, it's not an us versus them. Joe Biden's not saying all Republicans are bad guys. All Republicans hate the rule of law. All Republicans still are going to Chinese religious cult websites to get their information. No, he's talking about extreme MAGA Republicans. It makes a difference because there are a lot of Republicans out there that, again, this is about conversion. There are a lot of independents out there that Joe Biden's going to get voting for him.
A lot going on here. I'll agree with everything you've said, and I definitely agree with Joe Klein. With Mitch, that Joe Klein, I didn't agree with that. I don't think Joe Biden looks weak at all. I think he's managing wars, and there are so many accomplishments that you don't even know where to begin. And that's just not me talking. Take a look. It actually defies history in terms of the modern American presidency, in terms of what he's been able to get done, even on a bipartisan level, at the most divisive times in our history.
Especially on a bipartisan level, what he's accomplished is something that no president this century has accomplished.
But communicating it can't be just on Biden. It's got to be the campaign. It's got to be the Democratic Party. It's got to be the DNC. And if you look at Iowa, isn't it, in a way, a little bit of an MRI as to what the problem is, where the problem is? And I know these are Republicans, but literally, if you look at the number of Iowans who think the election was stolen, look at the number of people who don't care that he's been indicted. Isn't that a sign that a good amount of the electorate is poisoned? And how, Mitch, do you counter that? Because we can talk here about how great he is and all the accomplishment, but if a lot of people out there are completely poisoned and just laden with lies, they live and breathe them, how do you counter that?
Mitch, before you answer, I got to say again, we got to look at these polls and understand this is 14%. No, because you're talking about all Iowans. This is 14% of the electorate. And so we can't paint all of Iowa with the same brush.
I didn't take an MRI of all of Iowa.
14% of Iowan voters. Go ahead, Mitch.
Well, a couple things. First of all, thank you. I spent one of the greatest years of my life when I was 13 in summer camp in Iowa, and I love Iowa, and I love the people there. I think Joe is right. Some perspective here is important. Only 14% of people voted last night. And again, it was the extreme wing of the Republican Party, as they themselves professed by telling you what they thought before they went in there. And Iowa, as a state, is not really representative of the demographics of the United States of America. So I think that's an important part. But the other important thing to remember, and I think my friend Mike Barnicle is right about this, this has to be won at work, in the barbershop or the hairdressers, in the locker room, on the basketball court, on the corner, where people have to really start thinking about what Benjamin Franklin said is we have a republic. If we can keep it, every citizen has an obligation to protect and promote democracy, and you do that every day by how you treat their neighbor. Now, I want you to think about Donald Trump, who basically calls people vermin. And he says they poison other people's blood. Now, I don't care whether you're American or what country you live in. You shouldn't speak about another human being that way, because when you do, it allows you, when you have power, to hurt them the way that we have had atrocities occur across the country. And if people don't think they can happen in America, we really need to wake up, because freedom is not free. We have to fight for it every day. Many people have given the full measure of their life to make sure we protect it. I'll tell you who understands that. Joe Biden understands that, and he has told us about it many, many times. And on top of that, Mickey, just to put an exclamation point on this, Joe Biden came into office during one of the worst periods of chaos that Donald Trump created every day that he was president. I think he had four secretaries of defense in 4 years. And by the way, one of them, Mike Esper, is warning us that Donald Trump is not fit to be president, as is most of the people that have worked for him. Most of the people that work for Joe Biden, like me, will remind you that he is a decent man, a hardworking man, somebody that keeps people around him because they love him and they think he's doing the right thing. And he has accomplished more in 4 years than most presidents that have served. 14.5 million jobs have been created. You know how many Donald Trump created? Negative 2.5. Herbert Hoover level job losses that has never happened in another presidency. The unemployment rate is as low as it's been in many, many years. Wages are going up. Inflation is going down. Gas prices are going down. Prices for drugs are going down because Joe Biden wrestled the pharmaceutical industry to the ground. And when people wake up and focus on this very stark choice, a good guy versus a guy that could care less about anybody but himself, I believe the American people, Republicans, independents, moderates, Democrats, progressives, are going to say, we're going to save democracy together and make sure everybody has a chance in America.